Hello and welcome, everybody. Good to see you. Welcome on in to day 2 of the Daily Creative Challenge for Photoshop. I'm your host, Sam Peterson. I'm going to be hosting these challenges for the next 2 weeks. Like I said, this is going to be challenge 2, so we still have the rest of this week and all of the following week. And then after that, we're actually going to be doing 2 weeks of replays. So if you're watching this and it says Creative Encore down at the bottom, that means this is a replay. But that is just intended to give you a little bit more extra time to work on these challenges. And feel free to keep working on them and submitting them in the Discord. That's where you're going to share your challenges, and we'll talk about that right now. So first off, let me show you how to join these challenges. You can head on over to the landing page here at behance.net/challenge/Photoshop. You'll see this big blue button at the top. You can click Hi, take the challenge. That way you can register for the challenge, get notifications when they're revealed. And each day a new challenge is revealed. So we've already done super speed blur yesterday, and today we are doing portrait lighting effects. Use adjustment layers, color dodge, and multiply to create unique lighting effects for portraits. So basically showing you how to kind of fake lighting to fit images together if the images that you're using don't already have lighting when they were taken. So this is the landing page. You'll see all of these revealed each day, and you can scroll down further to see past challenges as well. So that's where you're going to find all of those. And let me show you the Discord. The Discord is the community where you can share these challenges. So we're not always live, of course, but we're always going to be in the Discord. There's always people sharing their work, giving feedback. You can get feedback. We have mentors in there giving kind of feedback, suggestions, critiques, things like that. So check them out. You can scroll up through the section that says challenge. It's under the feedback category. And that's where you're going to be sharing the current designs. There's also past challenges, ask a question, things like that. So if you want to share and participate in the community, this is the place to do it. Also, hey, to everyone in the chat, what's up, Wade? Susan, good to see you. Katarina, Steve, Festus, Casaboom, Anki, Susan, Marcia, Daniel, Christelle, so many names to name. Good to see everybody. And I think, what am I missing? Oh yeah, of course. If you are watching on YouTube, we're going to be reading the chat and questions over here on Behance. So definitely hop on over here if you want me to see your comments and questions. I can't watch 2 chats at once, so I'm mostly keeping an eye on the old Behance chat. And am I missing something? I don't think so. I think we can jump into it. So today's challenge is always fun for me. I love doing challenges and techniques that are kind of like lighting and shadow oriented. I think it's just because I paint and draw. I'm an illustrator primarily, so that's like that's kind of my bread and butter. I love painting. So that how these techniques translate into photos is actually pretty similar in a lot of ways. So first off, this is the photo I'm using. You can download the starter file down below if you want to follow along step by step, or you can just watch the stream and then kind of do your own take on it, depending on your skill level, your level of comfort, and how much you want to just kind of learn the techniques I'm going for, or just take the idea and, like I said, run with it. Gareth, I don't know if I said hey to you. Umacorn, what's up, everybody? Welcome on in. Glad to see everyone's here. All right, so I have this photo here. I also have a background photo. And what I'm going to be doing is using this photo here. So I'm just going to take this and copy and paste it into my portrait photo. So what I'm going to do is press Control A or Command A if you're on Mac, which is a hotkey for select all. You could also go up to select at the top and do all, and you'll see the hotkeys listed, which is really helpful. So Control A, Control C to copy, or Command C, and then Control or Command V to paste it. Now, if I press my Move tool, hotkey V, you'll see that this is much larger than my other photo. So I'm going to right click the new city layer that we just added, do Convert to Smart Object, and that way when we scale it down, we always have the ability to rescale it and not lose resolution. It's just maintaining the original photo essentially, so we're working non-destructively. I'm going to press Enter to confirm that, and now we got our city. Before we mess with the other image, I'm actually going to add a gradient map onto this. So you can do Layer, New Adjustment, Gradient Map for an adjustment layer. And then I'm going to right click that gradient map and do create clipping mask. I don't need to do that because it's just on the background, but I always like to clip my effects to the specific thing I'm trying to affect. But not totally necessary since it's the background. Now, if you go through these, you'll see different effects that gradient maps have on this image. And you'll see that some of these look very washed out. They don't really make sense. So my recommendation for you would be to try to have a very dark tone in the darkest part of your gradient map and a very light tone. So you're getting that full range of values. It doesn't need to be full black and full white, but something that is close enough that it starts to look realistic. So if I scroll down here, I have a bunch of saved ones. You'll see they all start with black. And these look a little bit more on point. You know, they look a little bit more of that full range of values. This looks like some crazy apocalypse scene. I actually have one called Cyberpunk, though. It's just, you can see here, it's blues and pinks. And we went over creating gradients, I believe, on the welcome day. So I covered that. I'm not going to go over it too much, but basically to add, you just click below the bar, click this color, and you can add in new colors. You can slide them around. You can click and drag them off to delete them. But I'm just going to go with Cyberpunk here. Just kind of this stylized effect, because we're going to be doing some stylized lighting. So I want to kind of make the background fit that mood. I think it's a little heavy-handed. I'm going to lower the opacity. So you can always kind of ease effects off with opacity, which I do all the time. Maybe like 50%. That's full effect right there. And this is closer to 50%. So I think that looks a little bit of realism in there. That is punky. It is punky indeed. We're going for some like cyberpunk-esque lighting here, kind of a stylized look today. So I'm going to leave that. I'm going to double click my background image, which is the portrait. Currently it's locked as the background. If you double click it, you can just click OK. It unlocks it. Now I can drag it up here. So what we're going to do is remove the background from this fella. I'm going to go ahead and select my quick selection tool, hotkey W. And at the top here, you know, this is my go-to select subject button. And Adobe always does a great job, so it gets most of the work done for you, saves you a lot of time. But we can always go in and edit it. It actually looks like it did a really solid job. Not surprisingly, because this background is just a flat color. So that's pretty simple. Yeah, retrowave lockup for sure. We're getting right back into the cyberpunk retrowave aesthetic. Hey, what's up, Sig? How you doing? A long time no see. RB, good to see you as well. So from here we can actually go into select and mask. I believe we did this the other day. One thing that is kind of a problem with such a bright yellow background is that we get a bit of color spill. And now it's hard to see, but if you zoom in, you'll see a little bit of that color spill. You'll see a little ring around his ear. Most annoyingly, you kind of see some of that yellow spilling onto his jacket. I don't really like that. So I'm going to go ahead and click decontaminate colors here over on the right-hand side. You can adjust the amount percentage. You can always play around with that, see what's most effective. I'm just going to leave it at 100 and see how we do. But I have the refine edge brush tool here in the top left selected. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to see if I can, with decontaminate colors selected, if I can just get rid of the halo around the ear. Let me try that again. See how this does. I definitely want to get rid of it. I'll do a little bit on the beard. Sometimes it can have an effect I'm not too keen on hair, but I think that's doing an okay job. And primarily, I want to get rid of that halo on the blue. So I'm just going to select and try this, just all the way down. And that looks like it worked. Let's try this one again. There we go. A little bit more here. It's subtle on the jacket, but this is something you might find yourself using in the future, especially with these stock photos with these really bright backgrounds. I think that looks solid. So I'm going to click OK and accept it. Hey, D, welcome on in. Good to see you. Yeah, that looks good. If you can try it without the decontaminate colors, but I think that works pretty well. I don't know if I already said this, maybe I just did, but sometimes I have to manually get rid of light spill. A lot of these Photoshop tools are AI driven, but you can always do things manually for the most part if it doesn't quite work how you want. You know, that goes for selections, that goes for a lot of things. And sometimes I'll use like a color layer. I'll grab a color layer and I'll just color pick the item that has the color spill, and I'll paint like, select the blue of the jacket and then paint over the yellow a little bit. And it's very, very subtle, very realistic. So yeah, pretty solid here. My issue now is that he doesn't quite fit in with this scene, especially the kind of apocalyptic, crazy cyberpunk background. Hey, Odari, welcome on in. Good to see you. Annika, too. Hey, everybody. So what I'm going to do is try to fit him in with the background a little bit. You can actually use things like Photoshop just keeps getting smarter and smarter. There's Harmonize now with neural filters. That's a lot of fun to play with. Maybe we'll talk about that later. Later throughout these days and weeks. But what I'm going to do is just do it manually. We're going to use an adjustment layer and do color balance. Again, there's the AI tools, which make life easier, and then there's the manual tools you can still always fine-tune things with. So it's good to know how to do them both ways. I'm going to go ahead and right-click my color balance and do create clipping mask. So it's selected on the man specifically, so it doesn't affect the background. Let me make sure I didn't miss a step here. Oh, yeah. Real quick before we get into that, I knew there was something I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about an issue that is very, very common. So this is an important little point I want to make, is if you're using your own photo or something that's not professionally lit or something that's not a stock photo, you might run into this issue where images don't match. And I see this all the time. That's why I want to talk about it briefly. A lot of times you'll have an image like the background, which has a really extreme contrast. It has very deep darks and very bright brights. But a lot of times people will use their own photos or things that aren't professionally lit and they're washed out. So that would look maybe a little bit more like this. You don't need to follow these steps. I'm just doing this with a levels adjustment real quick just to show you. Just for demonstration purposes. So I'm going to ease off the darks there, maybe brighten it up. So maybe your photo looks, vaguely like this. And the issue is that the contrast of the background is so much more extreme than the contrast of the figure. It doesn't look like they belong together. It doesn't look realistic. So a huge thing in terms of matching, or in addition to matching perspective and matching lighting, matching contrast is kind of a mistake I see very often that really kind of destroys the illusion you're going for. So in order to do that, you can just literally do the opposite of what I did. You do a levels adjustment, but you increase the contrast rather than decrease it. So I'd pump up those darks with this tone here, and you can pump up the brights if you want to increase the brights. You can do this with a curves adjustment too, but I'm a levels guy. So just a heads up, this is something I see a lot that makes images not seem like they fit together. In fact, I think the background may be a little bit too intense. Possibly because of the gradient mask, possibly. So I'm just going to ease off the darks a little bit. And maybe brighten it up slightly. And that's just going to take away some of that contrast just a little bit. I don't know if we need the brightening, but easing off the darks I like. So that way it gives a little bit more contrast to the figure. I think that looks good. We'll delete our demonstration figure and go back to what we were doing. So here we are. Color balance is what I was saying. That's where we are. Faraz, how you doing? Welcome in. So I'm going to go back into my color balance, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a little bit more blues. These cooler tones that we see in our scene, you can kind of adjust each one and see what it does, but I'm going to shift it more towards cyan. Maybe shift this one more towards blue. I can toggle it on and off and see what it looks like. Maybe a little bit of magenta, a little bit of pink. I don't want to get too warm. Let's try some shadows up here at the drop-down menu. We can change it to the shadow tones. Maybe a little bit of cyan, a little bit more blue, just cool tones I'm going for. Nah, I'm not going to go with magenta. I'll leave that neutral, that center one. I'm going to just leave it essentially 0. Toggle it on and off. That looks pretty good. I don't know if I went too heavy with the cool tones, but you can always ease it off because it's an adjustment layer. So we'll move on from there. Now I want to talk about lighting layers. This is where I'm going to talk about faking lighting. This is my favorite thing because I love painting, and I feel like this feels like the closest thing to painting for me. First, I'm going to talk about how I create shadow, and then I'm going to talk about how I create lighting effects. And both of these are things that I use together all the time. And both of these have two ways that I like to do it. So, you vote both? Oh yeah, is everyone curves or levels people in the chat? We need to pull curve or level. Yeah, absolutely. I've used curves before. I just find it like easier to slide. And I've never had a look that I couldn't achieve with levels that I needed curves for. So I guess that's why I've always stuck with it. But we'll go in here and first off, I want to show you an adjustment layer called exposure. And this is one way I create shadows. This is step one, or this is method one for shadows. And what I can do is I can clip that to my figure, of course. I'm trying to keep these all organized, only on the figure, not affecting the background. And I'm going to just take this exposure dial it down. That's -1, maybe, you know, just somewhere around -1. I think it looks pretty good for this, -94. That's fine. Another method is creating a new layer, Control or Command, Shift N, little hotkey for a new layer. And I just name my layers multiply. If it's a multiply, it's easier for me. But, you know, whatever naming convention you want. Clip that. And what I always do here, I'll do my little fill bucket with G. What did I do there? Let's try that again. Create clipping mask. Okay. And I usually use a very desaturated, fairly lightish blue-red. More towards the reds if it's a skin tone involved, but I just fill it there. And I can paint it in, and I can paint it out with a soft brush. But that's how I create shadows a lot of time. Very, very similar effect, you'll notice. Exposure versus multiply. It may just be slightly different in value, but it's essentially the same effect. So I use both depending on the circumstances. So that is shadows. And now let's talk about the two methods I use for lighting. So for lighting, I like to use, well, let's go method one first, is a hue and saturation layer. Now the thing about this is, I'll give you a little sneak peek already. Method two is going to be color dodge. Many of you probably already know this, my love for color dodge. But hue and saturation adjustment layers, and then color dodge layers. Hue and saturation, I tend to use when the subject doesn't actually need to be brightened too much. If I have an effect where I'm trying to get like a light spill on a subject, and I don't want to actually affect the values too much, oftentimes I will use hue and saturation. So in this circumstance, I'm not going to darken it down. I'm going to keep my little color adjustment. What if I actually ease off the opacity of that? Now I'm just getting perfectionist-y, but disregard that. Hue and saturation. So what I would do is I would click colorize here, this little checkbox that says colorize. And I can play with the opacity a bit. Excuse me. And maybe we'll do saturation, we'll crank that up. You can go crazy, but it looks unrealistic. Maybe something around 50, 60. And then you can get the hue you want. So we're gonna go for like a blue and red contrast here. Maybe something like that. You can also mess around with the brightness to give it a little bit of a lighting effect if you're trying to. But I keep that pretty low. We can do like 10. So what I'm going to do is select the mask of this, get my fill bucket, fill it all with black. Select white because black conceals, white reveals. And I'm going to select the good old airbrush. Now when you're doing brush work with a mouse, I always recommend playing around with the flow. But yeah, I find that this is good if you want like an effect, a coloration effect without brightening it up too much. So in this circumstance, if we're not darkening it down, I think this looks good. I'm going to duplicate that, create clipping mask, but I'm going to try changing the color here. So actually, let's just fill the whole mask with white so we can see what we're working with. And then go back to my adjustments. We could try like a blue. That's pretty cool. So I'm going to fill the mask in with black again so we can paint it in. And then select white to reveal it. And paint a little blue. So I think this looks pretty cool when you don't need to affect the values too much. The thing is, when you're affecting the values too much, I find that the darks kind of get blown out with this method, so it's not my favorite if I'm adding shadow in addition to the light. So I think this looks pretty cool. I think this works pretty well if you're just trying to get a little color light spill. So that's one method. But if we go back to our darkened method, this is the exposure layer. Hopefully all these layers aren't confusing you. I just try to give you different options here. My other method that I really like is color dodge. And like I said, I use this in tandem when I'm darkening down an image or when an image is already dark and I want to do a little bit of just like, I don't know, there's different methods to use this, but when I want to add a little bit of brightness to it. Change the blend mode to color, yeah, for sure. That's a good idea too. A lot of these things and tools and blending modes and everything can be very situational. That's why I'm trying to give you a few different methods to work with, because sometimes you'll find one is a little bit more suited to it than others. So hopefully this isn't too much information, but let's go ahead and create a color dodge layer. I name those CD just to remind myself that is a color dodge layer. And then we can try just pretty much painting it on. You can do the same thing with filling it in and then masking. But whenever I use color dodge and multiply layers, I kind of treat them like I'm just painting, because that is my background. So we'll try a really saturated pink. We can try messing around with these, kind of see what color we want. And the thing is, color dodge is really, really intense. So when you go bright, it's going to have like a nuclear, blast looking effect on it with how bright it is. But you can kind of just try to pick the color that looks good to you. So I'm gonna just paint on a little bit here. But what I like about color dodge is it does have that brightening effect. Depending on the situation, but oftentimes I get a pretty realistic effect from it that I'm pretty fond of. You can even do things like this where you can paint it on the area of the face that it would be landing on. This is a bit more, painting oriented when you do this. But what you could also do is you could make selections with the lasso tool or whatever your favorite selection tool is and fill that in and then blur it. So if you're not as comfortable with painting, there's a way to do this with shapes as well. But I'll just kind of quickly show you. Sometimes I like to think of the plane that it would be falling on, like the nose, catching the brow here, maybe a little bit of that side of the lip. Whoops. That looks kind of neat. Tanya, how you doing? Welcome on in. And then we can try one more. We can do color dodge 2, or call it color dodge blue. That would probably be the better naming convention. And then we'll try a little bit of blue. I'm going to right click that color dodge, do create clipping mask. Try it on this side too. And just do a little, maybe I want more green. Something like that. So it's like he's got some lighting coming from whatever balcony he's standing on. Maybe he's outside of a club. Maybe this is a club light. Maybe it's from the pink down below. We could adjust the opacity if we want to subdue that more. Make it a little bit more subtle and make it like the blue is actually, like I said, a club or something. So I could brighten that up. I can go really bright here, but at a certain point it starts to look like, why is there a light that is that intense? It doesn't look realistic. So play around with it. Saturation, the value, all that. I try to find a color that looks good on, most of it, and then paint that on a little bit. So I think I'll wrap this up here. I'll ease it off in the areas that look a little unrealistic, put a little bit on that nose, catching that nose from the side. And I think that looks pretty decent. So we faked a lot of lighting effects here. We used hue and saturation layers with colorize and color dodge layers for lighting. Both of those were lighting. And then we used exposure layers and multiply layers for shadow. It really is situational, but you can just use exposure for shadow, hue and saturation if you're not affecting the values too much. And then color dodge, I always really like for glow effects, for fake lighting effects and all that stuff. So hopefully that gives you some fun tools to play with. I would just say try to incorporate some sort of image with a background and make them look like their lighting matches. We also use the gradient map for the background. Just have fun with it. Hopefully this gives you some tools to play with and kind of have some fun effects with lighting, because those are always my favorite effects. You can go like way over the top with them, or you can make them really subtle and realistic, and I think they're always a ton of fun to play with. So join me on the challenge page if you haven't yet, and I will see you all in the Discord. Join the Discord. That's where you can post your challenges. You can get feedback. I'll be in there today. I'll be in there for the next 2 weeks. And then we got 2 weeks of replays, so you guys can keep working on this if you need a little extra time or anything like that. So thanks so much for hanging out today, everyone. It was great. Mercurial, good to see you. Christelle, Annika, Rosie, Ted, Miranda, RB, everyone. I'll see you guys next time. Have a good one, everybody. Farewell.